20 minutes, and then if I talk for half an hour, I don't hear any questions, right? Which I like, that I don't have any questions. I'm kidding. Okay, voluntary moral bioenhancement and the creation of both persons. In February of this year, in the Journal of Medical Ethics, I think it was February, there was in the February issue, Nick Ager published an article on the creation of both persons, and a variety of replies appeared, and then your reply to the replies. So I followed that, and I think something can be added to this debate, and I would like to do that. I'm not saying that what I'm going to say is some big discovery, whatever, but I think there are two additional points that I think could be made and have a tentative position I would like to propose in that respect. So go a little bit over your argument, a few of the replies. One of them, of the people present here, was Ingmar, the other one Rob Sparrow, if I'm right. So quite quickly over that, and then I'm going to propose something. The accent will not be on voluntary moral bioenhancement, but on the creation of both persons, and then I will try to connect it to this issue of voluntary moral bioenhancement. So the question, can moral bioenhancement lead to the development of morally enhanced persons, so-called post persons? So my answer to that is something I agree with Nick Ager. So we can do more than enhance our moral dispositions only. So we can also enhance our moral status. And here I'm in agreement with the position Ager took. Now the next question he raised was, will post persons jeopardize mere persons? For instance, sacrifice them for the benefit of post persons? One possible answer, no. The other, yes, they can. Why not? I'll sort it here four arguments, among which the first three appeared in the replies to Ager and J and E, and the fourth one is what I propose as an addition. So if post persons are around, we might be less likely to inflict catastrophic harm or ultimate harm upon ourselves, and that was very briefly in one sentence the argument Ingmar proposed, and I'm inclined to be sympathetic to that argument. The other so-called interest-based explanation, Alan Buchanan, post persons as cognitively and morally enhanced beings will be able to imagine more reasonably and vividly how scary death is, hence they will have a stronger interest to survive. In my opinion, it doesn't have to be so. If, as cognitively moral advanced persons, we are able to imagine vividly death, it doesn't mean that we will fear it more. We can reach an evolutionary stage when we will fear death less than we fear it now. So I think that is also an option. So we might not go in the direction of fearing death as post persons, but fearing it less than we do now. So to that particular argument of Alan Buchanan, I'm not going along with that one. Then, because by analogy, one might argue that we should be careful not to enhance the morality of our children, descendants, too much, as they might pass a certain moral status threshold and become post persons. Not sympathetic to that claim, because there is no reason to believe that this kind of traditional moral education will lead to the passing of a certain threshold. But the fourth argument is the one I would like to propose, is the following. Even currently existing mere persons will not easily sacrifice those who are believed to have a lower moral status, even in supreme emergencies or supreme opportunities, sometimes even not for the benefit of themselves. So this is contrary to, for instance, Jeff McMahon's position. Where do I find arguments for this, what I'm saying? That mere persons will not easily sacrifice those who are believed to have a lower moral status, even not in supreme emergencies or supreme opportunities. So, examples of that war and medical ethics. So, for instance, physicians are supposed to triage war casualties on the basis of their medical condition and not on the basis of whether they deal with soldiers who fight on their side or with enemy soldiers. So triage on the basis of medical condition, even in cases of perpetrators of terrorist attacks and their victims. So let me just cite something from the American Journal of Bioethics. So there has been written a lot about that, but let me give here an example. An article by Gesamtheit in the American Journal of Bioethics. So we see examples of here, the one he gave Israeli Defense Forces, a terrorist commits a terrorist act, and soldiers from the Israeli Defense Forces bring him to a hospital, that then he's being treated for, in this case, 8 months. Then discharged in stable clinical condition. His costs were, for treating him and for rehabilitation, were $350,000. And we were dealing here with a terrorist who committed a terrorist attack, but then he was treated in this way. Of course, this might be. It's just one example. I found tens of these kinds of examples. This can, of course, be the reason for the Israeli Defense Forces doing this is to get sympathy from the international public opinion, or their own public opinion, to see, okay, we have the moral high ground, we treat even terrorists as humans and so on. But whatever the reason is, they appeal to something, and that what they appeal is, in fact, a certain moral perspective, which says we should treat people with a lower moral status, it is terrorists, as humans when they are wounded, and we should not sacrifice them like that. So let's skip this argument. Hence, if mere persons do not have a value framework that favors the sacrifice of those with a lower moral status, that are the examples I was talking about, those persons will be even less likely to sacrifice mere persons. So I don't see a high likelihood in post persons jeopardizing or sacrificing mere persons, because even we are not in situations I'm describing so inclined to that with people who we consider to have a lower moral status, like terrorists. And the Geneva Conventions and so on, they all say that only urgent medical reasons will authorize priority in the order of treatment to be administered, and each belligerent must treat his fallen adversaries as he would the wounded of his own army, and so on. So this moral framework exists already in our moral reasoning, of the moral reasoning of persons. So in the case of post persons, that is likely to be even more the case. But even if post persons do not adopt such a practice, the one I described, it is if they abandon any deontology, any Kantianism, and so in favor of a utilitarianism favoring post persons, sacrificing mere persons, that is to be applauded as the morally superior stance, because the moral framework of post persons is by definition superior to ours. So even if they are consequentialists, And even if they wish to sacrifice us mere persons, why not? That is the morally superior stance then. And that is an argument that did appear in Ager's article somewhere. You mentioned that, but then you left it there. But I think it's a very important argument, so I am inclined to build on that. Hence, the moral justification for refraining from the creation of both persons in the future appears to be primarily based on species centrism or species narcissism. So, in spite of the fact that we have moral reasons to accept, even in the second case, even the disappearance of mere persons, why don't we do that? Because we are simply a bit narcissistic when our species is concerned. There are no other reasons to do that. But why should our species survive at any cost? Why not to create a morally superior species, or to enhance the moral status of our species, even if that entails the obliteration of our species, or the moral status of mere persons? And then, the second part of the argument, moral enhancement leading to the creation of both persons should be voluntary. Why? If moral enhancement has been imposed on someone, she has already lost some of her moral status and is more likely to be sacrificed by both persons in favor of both persons and those mere persons who have not been subjected to mandatory moral enhancement. So, if moral enhancement has been forcefully imposed on us and both persons have come into being on that basis, they have lost already much of their moral status. And hence both persons can treat mere persons who were forced to become both persons as morally inferior beings. But if they do it on a voluntary basis, there is no reason for both persons treating them in that way. Consequently, the development of both persons is morally justified only or primarily if moral bioenhancement leading to it proceeds on a voluntary basis. And my tentative position is the following: both persons are all right. They're fine, great people. Obviously. Second, we should be all right with them, because without fearing the obliteration of mere persons or our species, what is the reason to fear that? Apart from species narcissism. And thirdly, moral bioenhancement leading to their creations is to be voluntary. So this is my little tentative proposal to be added to this debate about the Nick Ager article that appeared in February. And that's it. I think I'm very I can do it even shorter than this.
Professor Harris. Vojin, I didn't understand that last point. Why would the fact that people have been coerced into being post-persons, they would be equally post-persons with the other post-persons, why would that even give a motive to treat them badly? That's the first part of the question. The second part of the question is different, not only in this room, but in current persons. There are vast differences in abilities of all sorts, to such an extent that vis-a-vis one another, we stand to many of our fellow persons as post-persons would to normal persons. But nobody thinks that gives, I hope nobody thinks, that gives some of us a right to lord it over the others or to treat them badly. There's no reason why we shouldn't treat personhood as a threshold, but I believe it should be treated. And it's a pretty low threshold, given how many persons how many human individuals count as persons. My God, it's a low threshold. But when we believe in equality, we believe in ignoring that threshold. So again, I don't see the danger.
The second part I agree completely with, and that is the point I tried to make. Perhaps I didn't succeed in that, but that was the point I was making. The third, the first question, if you have been forced to do something, you have lost your freedom, which you care about, I have the
Depends
impression.
what you mean by forced. I imagine, I mean, a lot of this would happen, I guess, maybe even prenatally, certainly in childhood. We force our children to undergo education, but we don't think that they've lost their freedom on that path. And as long as the post-person characteristics were like education, namely enhancement, I don't see why it would have that effect. We force our kids to go to school, but we don't think that that gives already educated people. We don't think they've lost their freedom, and B, we don't think that gives already educated people any reason for discriminating against them.
Yes, this is my reason how I can. So, imagine we are post-persons, and there are mere persons around, and they say, well, how did we come into being as post-persons? Because these mere persons wanted that voluntarily. On the other hand, if they have been coerced in one way or another to do that, we don't feel any, as post-persons, we don't feel any obligation towards them because they did not decide themselves to bring us into being.
I'm a post-education person. There are currently kids in education who are being forced to be there. Why? I don't understand why that would give me any reason to treat them badly in the way that you describe.
But
I think maybe
that's the second part.
Maybe you can find, we've got 5 questions and you're not going to have time for them. So the line so far is Michael, Tom, the lady from Croatia, Nick, and then Stefan. So yeah, and Michael.
Now was waiting for my name the whole list and then gave up. There's something. I mean, I'm not worried that post-persons might do us harm in a racist way. But the other side of the coin is what's called in psychology in-group favoritism. They will take care of themselves. So when they ask for resources, they will not crowd us out deliberately, but when they give preferences to people, to post-persons, we will, as a side effect, will be crowded out with resources. So that's why the analogy with the terrorist, I disagree that he has lower moral status, but whatever you mean by it, when resources are plenty, you may treat by the Geneva Convention that also. But when there is only one respirator, I think most people would say that you treat the victim and not the terrorist. So this is one point that there will be no malice against us, but as when resources are scarce, on a few goods, they will give it to the first person. The second one...
Malice against us, who do you mean by us?
I am not enhanced. It's you know, it's disclosure. So with post-persons, there's something good, like a higher education, access to medical school, a very expensive and very anti-cancer treatment. They would not say that Michael doesn't deserve it, but they would give it to somebody who is enhanced. It's not malice against me. It's in-group favoritism. They would favor deliberately or unconsciously somebody who is like them. Now, a remedy to this might be that a post-person might fall in love with me. So it's a way to bridge. I mean, and we are a couple. So there are other webs of attachment. That's how human race works. Unless you try to imply that the post-persons will also inbreed, or it might be prohibited that they breed with persons, then we'll like really divide into 2 different social groups. And that I see as a serious harm. But when you already talk about 2 groups of creatures, the post or the enhanced and the non-enhanced, this already entails very serious issues. If there's a group identity in it, if the post-persons believe themselves to be, it's like the stitches with a star on the belly.
That's fine. The only thing I can say here, why do I believe that terrorists have a lower moral state? They are treated, you probably agree with that, if I were a terrorist who just killed 100 people, that you wouldn't consider me as a person with a moral status that is equal to yours, probably.
You are, but you are a criminal.
Because?
you have the same moral status as I do have, but you are a criminal.
But I'm in prison.
You may see this subjected to self-defense or to trial or to punishment. I don't think that Hitler was of lower moral status. I think that he was a human being with the same moral status who was a criminal, deserved the punishment or annihilation by self-defense.
Okay, I think maybe we'll leave that. Tom, you were next.
This is a bit related to about your argument that current mayor persons don't treat beings of lower moral status worse than persons. And I also wasn't so convinced by the appeal to how we treat terrorists, partly because I think that most of us think that terrorists do have the same moral status, but just have done bad things. But also, because there are also other categories of beings that we think have lower moral status, like non-human animals and early embryos and fetuses that we do treat much worse. So we allow abortion, we farm animals, we don't do those things to persons. So even if terrorists are an example of a group of people with lower moral status that we treat nevertheless as persons, there are lots of other examples of beings with lower moral status that we treat worse, and arguably even treat worse than their lower moral status warrants. I wonder how you would accommodate the way we treat animals and beasts.
Well, there are people who believe that animals should not be treated as beings with lower moral status than non-human animals. So, or non-human animals should then be humans or fetuses. So there are people who believe that, and I have no reason to think that both persons will reach a higher moral status than we do will not be even more inclined to do that. And of course, the argument about terrorists is not, I know it's a matter of defining moral status, and perhaps I was not too precise with that, but I'm saying that if we are even willing to provide medical help to terrorists and their victims in the way that we do, that it's, in my opinion, very possible that both persons will be more inclined not only to such an act, but to treating animals in a more proper way than we do. So, what I imagine that both persons will be, they should be much better in that than we are. So I don't fear so much that we are that both persons will jeopardize us and sacrifice us for.
Sorry.
Okay, I have a couple of questions, but I'm going to try to be short. My first questions go around the word choice, and especially the word voluntary. Okay, choice. Can we really say that we do have a choice once when this option is posed? That especially goes, for example, if parents are choosing the morality of their children or something like that. Can they really choose if they have that option? If you have the notion of guilt on the other side, can they really choose for me, for myself, not to be more moral? Second question comes to this term voluntary. Isn't it logical to assume if one person is moral and values morality, that he or she will going to choose to be more moral? On the other hand, we have there is a possibility that if one values morality, that he is going to want to be more moral. On another hand, we have an immoral person, or somebody who does not, for any reason, value moral. So it is kind of logical to assume that he will not want to be more moral. So in that direction, we have just a bigger difference between moral and immoral persons in this post-person society. That is one question. And the second one is, do you think that there can be a moral enhancement? Because I've noticed that you are discussing moral enhancement, and in that sense, a term of post-persons. But each time that you are saying moral enhancement, you are saying real or perceived moral enhancement, or people who believe to have higher moral status, higher morality or something?
The reason for doing that is because I'm cautious, so I even grant the possibility that it's perceived more than I believe that is possible, but I don't wish to go into that. I leave that open because it's not relevant at that point from the argument.
First question.
The first question I don't think I understood. I know it, I don't understand.
Okay, there is a choice, and moral person. Do you agree or you disagree that the moral person would choose to be more moral, and on the other hand, the person that doesn't value moral high will not choose to be morally improved? And therefore, what does that lead to us? What kind of society?
I know it's a bit schematic, so even if I say, okay, yes, what is your conclusion from that?
That we are not going to have a better society, just a bigger difference between moral and immoral persons. Because the moral enhancement goes to enhance people who are not very moral. Probably.
So we have 4 minutes to go. I'm happy to let it run longer if you want, because we start. So Nick, you're the.
Great, I enjoyed the paper. So, I guess I have a question about the implications of changes in status. I mean, sort of regardless of whether they're voluntary or involuntary. So I'm just trying to, I guess it's sort of, here would be a bad strategy for someone in this room if we just alter some facts. Basically, we lock all the doors, we make everyone very hungry, and we put a cooker in that corner. It would be a very bad time for someone in this room to decide to become a sentient non-person, because you would be potentially first on the cooker, supposing people can't get out. So that could be sort of a change which was very prudentially bad for you, no matter how much fun you might have being a sentient non-person. And I guess I was thinking of the other kind of case. I mean, if someone voluntarily chooses or manages to find a way to become a post-person, effectively they've become someone whose interests are more significant or are more important than ours, and should be systematically satisfied ahead of ours. So, I don't know, they have a cooker. The voluntary creation of a post-person, a person deciding to become a post-person, effectively exposes us to quite significant harm. Now, I guess once they've done it, then we as mere persons maybe just should be dinner, but it's still not a prospect that I relish. But I guess that's sort of
I'm thinking about
I'm changing status. One person voluntarily changing status or involuntarily can have dramatic sort of consequences for them. I mean, if you assume that we comply with the rules of morality, dramatic consequences for them and for those whose status doesn't change, simply because they've changed in a relative way. Suddenly your interests count for less.
Yes, but
you can leave out the cooker. Okay,
no, but the argument I'm trying to make is that we cannot. You wrote that yourself, I think, that it is very difficult to imagine this threshold of post-person, how that will look like. So there is a possibility that they will have moral capacities of such a type that they will not sacrifice us because they owe to us, because they came from us into being voluntarily. That is the point. And the other, no one asked about that, but I think that's also an important argument. Even if they do not adopt the Kantian attitude, if that is not the morality of post-persons, but some kind of consequentialism, even if that is the case, that is the morally superior stance, isn't it? Because that's the stance of post-persons. Perhaps post-persons will have then, at one stage, the morally superior stance. But
the person among us who chooses to become sentient non-person, and we would be presumably by artificially designed circumstances so that no one gets out and everyone's very hungry. I mean, that would be the individual we should choose to sacrifice.
On
We'll take last two brief questions, and then we'll have to go to Mr. Stefan and so Stefan.
It's very much like the paper. I've got some worries concerning you introducing the moral
But I
concept.
didn't write a paper about this. People mentioned my paper, but I didn't write this paper.
Your presentation.
Oh, presentation. Oh, sorry.
Presentation.
Thank you.
I've got some worries concerning the introducing the term moral concept of the post-person, because we've already seen that in person there's a great variety of capacities, intellectual, cognitive capacities, and there's this recognition of the norm of equality among persons. So now we develop further, become enhanced human beings, develop further capacities, and these further developed capacities, with further developed capacities, still recognize us as equals. So I'm wondering why there's a need to introduce the moral status of a post-person, because already just by introducing the concept of a post-person implies the gap between post-persons and persons. So it would just be simple to talk about beings with further developed capacities who still belong to have the moral status of the personhood. Just as a suggestion.
So that is this argument. I didn't go into that, but in this issue of Jamie that was discussed, this threshold issue. Yeah.
Last question. Sorry.
Yes, I think my question was already focused regarding the animals and the evolution, and I think you already answered.
Okay, and did you have a question at the back there, at one point? Okay. All right, so we are at time, so please thank Vojin. So